do for me too.
You have heard it said, love your neighbors and hate your enemies. But I tell you to love your enemies. Anybody familiar with that? That is Jesus speaking on his most famous Sermon on the Mount. And as we look at this from a leadership aspect, we have to break down this. Jesus is giving a river of righteous and holy teachings. He speaks to the heart of the law. He speaks past the common knowledge of the law. He speaks to the way that God sees things and how we should conduct ourselves. And in this river, there are a lot of things that we can easily grab and grasp. But then there are tributaries that we can peel from it. And I want to look at that and apply it to leadership. Opposition is another word for enemy. When we think of enemies, we think somebody who is doing you wrong and somebody who is trying to promote or provoke harm to you and this and that. But in its basic definition, an enemy is anybody who opposes or challenges your stance or your position. If we play in sports, my opposition is the team that does not want me to score or is that is in the way. Does that mean that they're inherently evil? No, but we tend to think of it that way. So let's look at it in its basic context. Jesus says to love your opposition. Well, how do I love my opposition? I value their position. If I'm a leader, I value those who challenge and oppose me. Well, who often are the people that challenge and oppose us the most? Those that we have authority, we have oversight over, and that we have this mantle to lead. My wife, my children, my co-workers who I'm given authority over, boys that I coach, so on and so forth. They often cause me the most opposition. They challenge me the most. They don't see things my way. They have their own way of doing it, and it's opposition. So in certain circumstances, more than we would like to think, they are enemies, not because they are bad, but because they challenge us. And Jesus says, love them. Okay, Jesus, I do love them. I do have this sentiment for them. I do want the best for them. How do you treat them? Ultimately, do you value them? So as we look at love and as you go through the whole Sermon on the Mount and even the Bible just entirety, a lot of times, if not all cases, you can substitute the word love for value. Because I can sit there and say love them, and you say, well, I do love them. Well, now the question becomes, okay, how do you show you love them? That's where we get into trouble. Because do you show your love? Do you value them? How do you think about them? That will show you whether you value them. And in any time we fall short of valuing people the way that they should be valued and according to how God sees them, we are not loving them. So as a leader, am I valuing my wife? Am I valuing my kids? Am I valuing my players? Am I valuing this? Am I valuing their stances, their positions, their journeys? Am I valuing that? I can honestly say more times than I would like to admit, but I don't value it because I only see it from my way. And so Jesus is saying, love your enemies. And I'll get into the subsequent part of that verse in a second. But if I can value my enemies, if I can value my opposition, my opponents, those who challenge me, if I can value my followers, then ultimately I can look at them and love them in the right way. Well, Coach Jones, that's kind of hard to do because not everybody is easy to love. Okay, that's true. Everybody is not easy to love. It's hard to value certain things. The last time I talked about the person who goes to a yard sale and buys something and they assign value to it, and I use God as that's what he does for us. He has done that for us. But we also have been given that authority to value things, and we have ownership of things. And a lot of times people put stuff out. I can see that same thing if I go to a yard sale and be like, I can do something with that. I find value in that. There are times where I know what I want to do with it, or I have an idea, but it's kind of hard to value that. And so maybe I don't see that there's a need to deal with it, or I kind of just put it to the side. That is for those who say, well, it's kind of hard to value certain things, hard to value people in their position and their mindsets and this and that. This is where the next part of the verse goes. Not only does he says love your enemies, he says what? Pray for those who persecute you. So if I can't see it from an aspect of leadership because I'm so focused on what I'm trying to do and they just so hard to deal with and they don't see things my way or they ain't walked a mile in my shoes and their journey is easier than mine, or I don't see why they struggling with this or why they challenge and oppose, look at it from the opposite side. You know how it's like to be mistreated. You know what it's like to be undervalued. You have been in positions where you have been the one who has been devalued, undervalued, overlooked, mistreated, taken advantage of, persecuted. I don't have time to go into persecution, but anything that comes from an opponent that causes damage is persecution. Often it's with the intent to do so, but even if it isn't intended, it's still a form of persecution. And he says, pray for those who persecute you. I'm going to give you a little bit of context. Some people know it, but for those who don't, let's pay the context about which Jesus is speaking or in which Jesus is speaking. He's talking to a heavy Jewish crowd, a lot of people, right? And we could deduce that there are Roman officials there, Roman soldiers who are kind of making sure that nothing gets out of hand. And as Jesus is speaking, he's speaking to Jews, most likely in the midst of Romans, who are being persecuted. Jews who are being persecuted by those Romans. And he's saying, love your enemies. I'm pretty sure there's some would be like, okay, I'm hearing you, but that's hard to do. You see how they treating us? And he says that exactly. Spiritually, he's like, exactly. You understand what it's like to be mistreated, so don't do that to anybody else. Love your neighbors. Cool. My neighbor is somebody who agrees with me in most cases, who is trying to go the same way I'm going, who is on the same path, who has the same mindset, but my enemies don't. They don't share that. That same wish, that same goal, that same focus. They don't. They don't have the same mindset. That's why they're an enemy. They're opposition. He's saying, because you understand what it's like, love, value them. And I tell you to pray for what? Endurance? Okay, cool. Pray for well-being? Cool. Pray for safety? Cool. But more so, pray for them. Pray for those who persecute you. Pray for those who have a power, authority, who have the ability to persecute you. Pray for them. Show them grace. Show them mercy. So if it's hard to see value in somebody and it's hard to assign value to them, then I would challenge you to see it from the other side. Again, I'm not saying that's the only thing he meant, because it's a river of righteousness that he is given to us through the word that is captured, and in that time, those who are listening. But it still applies to leadership in that way as well. The tributary that we're traveling down today, or this, as I say this, is we are called to value those who challenge us, especially those who follow. And when that's hard, we have to assume the other role as a follower to say, you understand what it's like. So you need to pray. You need to value them and show them grace and mercy. So it's not just one side, it's two sides of the same coin. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Because in that, you would then be fulfilling the Father's will. You would show yourselves to be children of God. You would show yourselves to be worthy. We want God to see value in us. And so because you're seen as valuable, see valuable to children of his as well, or those who have a possibility to become children as his. And if you say, well, I want to look at it from that deep spiritually, let's focus on just practical leadership principles. You don't want to be mistreated as a follower because you're growing, you're developing, you're trying to be better. Like, look, I'm learning, like, dang, why you treat me like I should just know this. When you are in that leadership position or you have that opportunity of power or being in authority, you have to value those who oppose you. Value those who bring challenges. Value those who see things a different way. And when you do that, you show love. Last thing I'll say is if you do not value and you start to denigrate, you start to devalue, have a disdain for people, that starts developing into hate. Hate is the opposite of love. And love is not just a sentiment, a mindful thought. It is a deep internal heart depiction towards or about somebody. So if you are not valuing and finding the value, if you are not seeking to understand and develop, then you're ultimately building a bridge of hate or destroying. I'll say you're building, you're destroying the bridge. You're despising, you're degrading. You might say, I ain't said anything, but you're thinking it, you're feeling it. It's not just I'm frustrated or I'm annoyed or I'm bothered. It's you allowed yourself to sit in that. And what has happened over time is you developed a hatred for this person, for this idea, for this position. And so now you can't even love. You can't value because you no longer see the value in that. They're worthless. They don't have a place. I don't have time for this. I ain't dealing with this. They just need to stop. You're hating. We use that word hating. Oh, you hating just because we disagree. That's not hating. But hating is, I don't want to see you succeed. I can't see you succeeding. You have no value. You're worthless. Anything you do is meaningless. Jesus says, you have been told to love your neighbors and hate your enemies. But I tell you to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Again, I tell you to value those who oppose you and show grace and mercy to those who have authority over you. Then you will prove yourselves worthy of leadership. In that case, you'll be ready to lead up.